Spirited Away. It is not only the most commercially successful film, but also the lifetime favorite of so many, including myself. But are there not some parts in the film that make you feel uneasy? That's totally normal because there are some horror elements in it. Japan makes me scared. Konbanwa minasan. Welcome to Japan Makes Me Scared. I'm Junpei, a lover of kaidan, Japanese horror and scary stories. Today, I'm gonna talk about Ghibli's masterpiece, Spirited Away, and how you can watch it as a horror film, with some deep analysis of hidden meanings, mythology, and folklore. Just one thing to make sure, you've watched the film already, right? If you haven't, we just go to Netflix first and come back here in like 2 hours. Then you will enjoy more of this video. Alright, let's get started. At the beginning of the beginning, we have to talk about this term, Kamikakushi. Because, Spirited Away is the English title, but the Japanese title is 千と千尋の神隠し. There's Kamikakushi in it. Kamikakushi is composed of two kanjis, kami meaning spirit of God, and kakushi meaning hidden. Now you can guess what it means, right? Kamikakushi describes a phenomena where a person is hidden by the spirits. So for those who understand Japanese, when we see the title of the film, we can immediately assume, so there'll be missing people, and Chihiro and her parents will be the ones. We immediately knew there'll be some horror experience there. Actually, the film also contains other typical elements of Kamikakushi. For example, near the ending, Chihiro and her parents seem to have no memory of the different realm, or time passes slower in the other world, so it passes more time in the original world after coming back. Also, I've talked about Kamikakushi itself in more detail in the other video, so you can check it out if you're interested. Now, coming to one of the first scenes, Chihiro and her parents were going to their new house, but they took the wrong way. Then, they were passing in front of a Torii gate, leaning to a ruined tree. From there, the paved road ends and becomes a mountain path. A torii is a Shinto structure usually built at the shrine's entrance. It is said to be the entrance from the human world to the world of the gods, so it has a sacred road like that. Then, what does it mean that the torii is leaning against a tree? Possibly, in the past, this torii gate was set up in the middle of the road, facing the mountain. For the people of that time, it served as, as I said earlier, an entrance to the world of gods. But at some point, it could be because of people's religious faith wanting, or the decrease in the number of the visitors to the area. I'm not sure about the truth. But anyway, eventually, as urban development took place in the surrounding area, the torii gate was removed for some reason. In principle, the removed torii should have been treated with special care, but somebody like the contractor who removed it carelessly popped it up against the tree. If you look around the torii, you will also see that the small shrines have been carelessly placed as well. We call them Hokora in Japanese. That is also where some gods reside. The same story might apply here. In the past, these Hokora were also placed around the torii and treated with special care. But again, at some point, they were removed and carelessly placed underground. Anyway, what we can see from this scene is that the absence of the torii, which, used to function as the entrance to the world of the gods, expresses the typical opening scene of a Kamikakushi story. And obviously, Chihiro and her parents were unconsciously lured into the other world, and you get lost soon after. After going through the tunnel, Chihiro and her parents found themselves in a plain and then a small town. Seeing this, Chihiro's father assumed it might be something like a closed theme park. This is not an unusual thing in the real world either. In the 1980s, Japan was experiencing extremely rapid growth, which is known as the Japanese bubble economy era. Around that time, there was a theme park boom in Japan, and there was a rush to open them all over the country. Many of these theme parks were forced to close at the end of the bubble era, and now remain as kind of ruins. Actually, in modern Japanese horror stories, there are many stories where these ruins become the homes of spirits, and those who visit them have terrifying experiences there. So for kaidan horror story lovers like me, even this scene alone could have a horror element already. However, this may raise a question about the Torii gate mentioned earlier. If this was once a sacred area, why was a theme park built there? Actually, again, this is also a typical pattern in many Japanese horror stories, like they built something that didn't fit in with the area, whether they knew it or not, on land that was already sacred. If you do that, obviously there would be strange things happening then. The scenes in Spirited Away about being caught up in such a place. After Chihiro was left alone by her parents, she was walking on the bridge to Yuya, the bathhouse, where she met Haku, a beautiful boy in white kimono. Then, while Haku looked quite upset, shouting to Chihiro to leave, there was a scene where the shadow on the bridge grew longer and longer, super quickly. And I think the expression here is related to the concept of Tasogaredoki in Japan. Tasogaredoki is a Japanese term that describes the time between day and night when it starts to get dark. It is said that it should be around 6 p.m. in modern time. This time is also called Omagadoki, which means a time when you're more likely to encounter mysterious things from the other world, such as yokai and spirits. In other words, this Tasogaredoki is a time when the boundary between the human world and the world of spirits kind of blurs. So the shadow getting longer could be representing the rapid shift from the human world to the spiritual world. One of the most shocking scenes in the first few minutes of the film should be when the parents turn into pigs after eating food in a strange town. What does this show us? I think it probably shows that they can no longer return to their original world for the time being because they have eaten food from the other world. In Japan, food has long been an important element of ritual. In particular, the important point is where the food was made. There has been a belief that if you eat food cooked in a world different from your own, you would belong to that world and be unable to return to your original world. For example, when you go to a funeral in Japan, there is a food called makurameshi. A bowl of rice is piled high, and a chopstick is placed in the rice to offer to the deceased. This is not cooked in an everyday kitchen, but in a specially made one for this purpose. So makurameshi is a food that the deceased eat so that they can settle in the afterlife without getting lost. That is why the living must never eat this food. If they do, they will also belong to the other world. In fact, this custom, they do not eat the food of the other world thing, is mentioned in the myth in Kojiki, which is said to be the Japanese oldest historical book, published around 8th century. According to Kojiki, the first male and female gods, Izanagi and Izanami, had the world's first marriage, and the goddess Izanami gave birth to the islands of Japan and all the things in the world. At the end of this, she gave birth to the god of fire, but because of that, Izanami died from her burns, becoming the first person to die and enter the world of the dead below the ground, which is called the land of Yomi. Her husband, Izanagi, chased after her to the land of Yomi, saying, "Let's go home." But Izanami replied, "Too bad. You should have come earlier. I've done Yomotsu Hegui." This term, Yomotsu Hegui, refers to eating food cooked in the land of Yomi. That's what's referred to in the film Spirited Away as well. Let's get to the other example from the film. After Chihiro was unable to return to her original world, when her body became transparent, Haku gave her something like a small nut. This was Yomotsu Hegui for Chihiro. By eating that nut, her body regained substance and she was able to stay in that mysterious world. What's interesting here is, while eating Yomotsu Hegui prevented Chihiro from returning to the original world, it also meant that she was able to exist stably in the other world. Yomotsu Hegui helps to anchor the person who ate them in the other world and ensure their existence. When you think about it like that, there must be another reason why Chihiro's parents turned into a pig. Because, Chihiro herself, who also had Yomotsu Hegui, did not turn into a pig. This is probably because pigs are seen as a symbol of greed, and her parents, who had such desires for sure, were turned into pigs as punishment. In the film, there was also a scene where it was mentioned that these pigs would later be cooked and eaten by the gods. So I think these pigs were portrayed here as greedy beings who had done something unforgivable. I think the most iconic character in the film is Kaonashi. Do you also agree with that? Kaonashi is called No Face in English, but what kind of existence is he? Some people might think he's kind of arrogant or greedy because he seems to have gone mad at times, but that's actually a big misunderstanding. Hayao Miyazaki, the director of Spirited Away, said in an interview, there are lots of people like Kaonashi around. People who want to be like somebody, but are just no one. So Kaonashi is a being that has no self and changes every time depending on the things and the people it encounters. Indeed, if you think about it, you can easily imagine those people exist in daily life, right? Also, if you look at his appearance, you can see similarities with No masks. No masks are used in No, which is a traditional Japanese theater show. In the show of No, the character can become a completely different person with a completely different set of emotions by changing the No masks. It matches the feature of Kaonashi, doesn't it? In fact, Kaonashi wasn't very arrogant and greedy from the beginning. He was just saying, and nodding only. Quite innocent and naive as a little boy. He was becoming like arrogant and greedy just after swallowing some workers in the bathhouse, like the frog yokai. So that greed was coming more from those swallowed, possibly. Also here, let me share a small fun fact. Do you remember Kaonashi couldn't enter the bathhouse by himself and was only able to enter when Chihiro invited him in? This is just my guess, but think about some vampire films. In those films, there is a rule that vampires can't enter a house without permission from the people living there, which is called an invite. And it seems that this invite rule is also applied to Kaonashi for some reason. By the way, we don't have this kind of rules in Japan, so it could be kind of a tribute from Hayao Miyazaki to these of the vampire films. And that could be proof that Spirited Away is also a horror film, isn't it? When Chihiro first entered the bathhouse through the back door, the first person, or yokai, or whatever you name it, was Kamaji. He looks like a yokai with multiple hands, and also has a rather fierce look about him, with his sunglasses and beard. But as you keep watching the film, this man is actually a very kind, heartful person who helps Chihiro in various ways. such as by introducing her to Yubaba to get her job. You know, in the world of Spirited Away, humans are generally looked on and discriminated against, but Kamaji was not a bully at all, so there must be some kind of background to it. Perhaps it comes from a certain type of yokai that may have been the model for Kamaji. The yokai that is said to resemble Kamaji is Tsuchigumo. This is a huge yokai with the face of an oni, demon, the body of a tiger, and the limbs of a spider. While Tsuchigumo is one of the most famous yokai in history, there is a theory that the true identity of Tsuchigumo is a term to refer to the local warlords who were rebelling against imperial power. At the time, the local warlords who opposed the imperial court were both a danger and a target to be looked on, and that could be why they may have been discriminated against by being portrayed as monsters with inhuman appearances like demons and spiders. What if we assume that Kamaji is the one last surviving kind of Tsuchigumo? Because his kind had been discriminated against, he was maybe feeling some kind of sympathy for Chihiro, who was also the target of discrimination in the world of the gods. That could be why he could be super kind to her. The person who gave Chihiro a job contract is Yubaba. She's also the owner of the Bathhouse. She has kind of a look of a Western witch, but there's also theory that she's based on the Japanese yokai, Yamamba. Yamamba is a Japanese monstrous being that has existed since ancient times and is said to lurk in the mountains. It is said to have an ugly face with long hair and nose, and to lure children into the mountains and eat them. Yamamba is often related to a Western witch, in terms of their scary ugly faces, as well as their ability to shapeshift. In addition, a son, Bo, can also be a factor that supports this Yubaba-Yamamba theory. Bo is a huge child with a selfish personality, but is a lovable character in the end who went on adventures with Chihiro. His appearance is similar to Kintaro legend, which has been passed down in Japan since ancient times. Kintaro is a character from Japanese folklore and children's stories, and the legend goes that he was a strong young man who grew up in the mountains and met the Kamakura era ruler, Minamoto no Yorimitsu, then defeated the famous Oni, Shutendoji, with him. This Kintaro's appearance is almost exactly like that of Bo in Spirited Away. On the other hand, there is also a theory that Kintaro was raised by Yamamba, so from this relationship, we can see Yubaba as a Yamamba mom and Bo as a Kintaro son. See, we can see the connection. In the bathhouse, there was a scene where various gods were having a bath and the maids were cleaning their bodies. But have you ever wondered why it is only the women who were cleaning the bodies? One theory to explain this is that the bathhouse is actually a metaphor for the house of the prostitutes. In the story, the women who work at the bathhouse were called yuna, and this word was also used to refer to women who work at hot spring facilities in the Edo period, which was like 400 years ago. At first, yuna in the Edo period provided services such as body scrubbing and haircutting, but gradually this developed into prostitution, and there was a history of the government at the time issuing a ban on it. It is said that many of the women who work as yuna were sold by their parents for some sad reasons, such as death, and that many of them had nowhere else to go. These women were not given their real names either, but rather stage names known as genjina. These features remind you of Chihiro and other women working in the bathhouse, don't they? Although the director, Hayao Miyazaki, is never explicitly stated this, he has made comments in intervals that Yuna is a form of prostitution. So he at least intended to deliver sarcasm about modern society in a way, even if he didn't directly depict it. Later in the film, there was a scene where Chihiro took a train to where Zeniba lived, the sister of Yubaba. In explaining this scene, it is important to understand the existence of the Sanzu River. Sanzu River is one of the concepts of the Buddhist world of the dead, and refers to the river that flows between this world and the other world. The train that Chihiro was on ran through a world of water, and this should represent crossing Sanzu River and heading towards the world of the dead. Then what becomes interesting is the word Kamaji mentioned before Chihiro was taking the train. He said, in the older days, it was possible to travel both ways, but now it's a one-way trip. This part of the story may also be said to have its origins in Japanese mythology. As mentioned at the beginning of the story, the Izanagi-Izanami legend from Kojiki is coming here as well. In the past, it was possible to travel between the world of the living and the world of the dead. But Izanagi blocked the path connecting two worlds with a large rock at some point. What Kamaji said was probably indicating this concept from the legend in Kojiki. Let's move on to the last mystery, which is about the existence of Haku. Who exactly was he? When you have seen the film all the way through, there was a scene where, on the way back to the bathhouse from Deniba's house, Chihiro recalled her past memories, and Haku himself remembered that he was the garden god of the river, Nigihayami Kohakunushi. Combined with the cool BGM by Joe Hisaishi, it's one of the most touching and beautiful scenes in the film, I could say. However, there is a frightening theory about Haku's true identity, that he was actually Chihiro's brother who died in the past. Of course, there is no clear reference to Chihiro's brother in the film, and the theory may seem a bit crazy at first glance. But actually, there are several factors that make the theory convincing, which I will share with you here. First, remember this scene. Chihiro herself recalled falling into the river and almost drowning. The scene depicted here shows a hand reaching into the river, and most people probably thought that was the hand of Chihiro. But just going to one scene back, in the memory of Chihiro, she was described naked. If the hand extending into the river is not hers, isn't it the hand of someone who tried to save Chihiro from falling into the river? But it doesn't look like the hand of an adult. It looks more like that of a child. In fact, the storyboard of Spirited Away clearly shows it as a child's hand, so there is no doubt about it. Then this theory came up. This hand could be Chihiro's older brother's, and that he may have lost his life by saving Chihiro's life. Here's another thing. If you rewind back to the beginning of the film and think about it, did you ever feel that Chihiro's mother was somehow very cold toward Chihiro only? It's actually weird, isn't it? Chihiro is her own daughter, but she has kind of dismissive attitude toward Chihiro all the time. What if this was also the case in the situation where her brother died because of Chihiro? Her mother unconsciously resented Chihiro for causing her son's death, even if she knew it was not intentional. This makes the situation where she treated her coldly more convincing, doesn't it? And also, the relationship between Chihiro and Haku. You could probably feel a love between them for sure, but it didn't feel like a romance love, did it? If it is said this could be a sibling love, doesn't it sound more convincing as well? There are more and more things. There are lyrics that the director Hayao Miyazaki wrote thinking that it would be a theme song of the film. The song was entitled Ano Hi no Kawa de, which can be translated as On the River That Day. This song didn't make it in the film at the end, but the lyrics have remained. One of the lines was saying like, I who live for someone else, someone who lived for me. This someone who lived for me may be her brother, Haku, who died in order to save Chihiro. Also, when Chihiro was returning to the original world, Haku said, don't turn around. You remember that scene as well? This could actually also imply that he's a dead person. That's right, isn't it? Why should she not look back? Since it is the last parting of the ways, why not just leave with a grand farewell, as one would normally do? Then it would be more natural to think that there was something Haku didn't want to be seen. That is why Haku said to Chihiro that she should not look back. For this consideration, I would like to look again at the legend of Izanagi Izanami in Kojiki. Now getting used to it, right? So Izanagi went to the land of the dead to pick up a dead Izanami, but Izanami cannot return home because she has already completed her Yomotsu Hegui, the food of death. Since she still wanna go back, Izanagi just tried to take Izanami to the world of the living, but was told by Izanami never to look back on the way there. But as you could probably imagine, Izanagi just look back. A common mythological mistake in many parts of the world. Anyway, there, he found Izanami as a rotting corpse becoming an inhabitant of the land of the dead. This story may lead to the final farewell scene between Haku and Chihiro. So what's implied here? Haku realized that he is Chihiro's brother, and this seemed to help him finally become a resident of the world of the god. However, like Izanami, he may have taken on the appearance of a decaying corpse as part of this process. Obviously, he didn't want Chihiro to see him like that for sure. That is why he said, don't turn around. If this had been mythology, Chihiro might have stupidly looked back along the way, and the ending would have been a complete disaster. But this film is an animated fantasy that children also watch, so possibly Hayao Miyazaki managed not to clarify this part that much, leaving some mysteries to the audience. Oshimai. Thank you very much for watching the video. It was such a long journey, wasn't it? I feel like I've gone too far in some parts, but I hope it can help you watch Spirited Away from a different angle, with some horror elements next time. In the film, there are so many theories behind every scene, but actually, I'm not surprised, because I think Hayao Miyazaki is the type of person who likes to scatter his own ideas, passions, and thoughts throughout his works in the first place. Also, he's very good at hiding this kind of information with well-educated humor and beautiful music and drawings. So I get the impression that there are many things in Ghibli films that are not obvious on the first time watching. And I think that's the best part of a Ghibli film, isn't it? Each time you see it, you make a new discovery. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. That'll be a huge motivation for me for sure. Also, if you like this kind of deep dive into some Japanese films with horror dimension, please let me know in the comment. This is actually a new challenge for me, so I would like to know if you guys like it. Alright, we're getting close to the end, so let me say one thing. Arigatou gozaimasu for watching this video from Japan Makes Me Scared, and sayonara for more children fruits next time. Bye!